Bienvenidas, bienvenidos, welcome, bienvenidos. So it's great to have you here with us again. Today, our partners from the Vision Zero Academy will present governance and leadership, data-driven safety approaches. Damos la bienvenida, welcome to all our cities. Also, we want to welcome all our Vision Zero partners. And we also want to welcome and say thank you to all our Vision Zero sponsors, 3M, PTB Group, and Volvo Group. Thank you for your support. Let me introduce our two speakers. Peter is Senior Advisor and from the Swedish Transport. So please, Peter, we will be glad to hear your experience and presentation to get. Go ahead. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just check that I can share my screen. So, can you see my presentation now?
Yes, Peter, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be a part of this Vision Zero Challenge. It's very, very interesting, of course. Today I will talk about governance and leadership in the road safety work. And first of all, I want to start with, let's say, the traditional way of increasing road safety has very much up until today has been to take behavioral shaping measures directed towards the individual road users. For example, regulations, enforcement, education, information, and campaigns, and so on. And these tools or these measures, they aim at making the individual road user to behave correctly in traffic. And these measures, they are mainly taken by the government and directed towards the road user. And that implies that the leadership and responsibility for road safety lies very much with the government. But is this really a true leadership and an effective way of governing road safety? In reality, this means that the responsibility to survive in road traffic is more or less delegated from the government to the road user. You have to behave, and it is your fault as the road user if you are in an accident or have an accident. And this is not a sustainable way to govern road safety from a Vision Zero perspective. We have to understand that the road transport system is a very, very complex socio-technical system, and we cannot always negotiate it safely. And that's because of our psychological and cognitive limitations as humans. We cannot adapt the human to this complex system fully. Instead, we really have to adapt the system to the capabilities of the human. We must understand that there are many, many different processes in society which influence what the road transport system looks like and how it works. And these processes have a large impact on road safety. And examples of such processes is that we have road authorities and municipalities, and they design and build and maintain the infrastructure. We have vehicle manufacturers developing and producing vehicles, and we also have large companies, public authorities, etc. And they buy and generate transports throughout their whole value chains. So there are many, many processes that influences the way the road transport system looks like. And when we talk about strengthening leadership, we often hear that we must strengthening leadership for road safety. We often mean that there should be or is a need for some kind of strong governmental lead agency, and that this agency in a way practices the traditional leadership and governance model, which I was talking about in the previous slide. But that means that what that really means is that first we create a road transport system without including road safety. We just build it, and then we say, okay, we solve the road transport, the road safety problem in hindsight, and we do that by mainly putting the responsibility on the individual road user, and we tell them to act perfectly. And this is not an effective, once again I say it, it's not an effective or sustainable way to treat the road safety problem. Instead, we must look at it in another way. Of course, it's important to have some kind of strong lead agency that keep the road safety work together in a country. But most important is that such an agency should not continue to work only through the traditional governance process, which I showed in the previous slide. This agency must have a broad toolbox of different policy instruments or tools or measures to be able to create and stimulate responsibility taking and leadership for road safety in many of those processes which influences the road transport system. And of course, we have the traditional legal instruments, but they can also be directed towards not only the road user, but also system designers. For example, you can have legislation that they should have a safety management system. This is very, very common in aviation, in railway, and so on. And we can also have legislation on sustainability reporting. I will come back to that, to sustainability reporting later in my presentation. We can use economic instruments like public procurement. That is something a little bit new I will touch upon later also. But then we also have the traditional ones like taxes and grants and so on. And we can also use communicative instruments, like, for example, different new car assessment programs. You have the Latin NCAP, which is very important. It can also be the spreading of research and development results. And there are many others also. And of course, we need also to have combinations of the different policy instruments, depending on what processes we are working with or what we want to achieve. And these policy instruments that I described in the previous slide, they very much influence the processes directly. You can see it in the blue, marking there, and they influence the processes directly. But it's also important. We can now see that there are other mechanisms or actors in the society which maybe not is commonly connected to or seen as stakeholders in the road safety area, and they can also influence the processes. For example, investors today, they talk about green investments, sustainability investments, green bonds, etc. So we need to understand more. We need to explore, as governments and or communities or wherever, we need to explore these mechanisms more to find new ways to influence different stakeholders and in that way improve road safety. So there are many possibilities to influence these processes that in turn influences the safety of the road transport system. And what I have said, that it's not totally new in a way, because if we look at the 2030 agenda, we can see that what I have said very much goes hand in hand with that. And the agenda makes it very clear that we cannot reach the sustainable development goals without a substantial contribution from the private sector. And if we look especially at target 12.6, it means that companies, private enterprises, etc., they are expected to take the responsibility to generate sustainable transports And we must also understand now that road safety is a part of the sustainable development goals at the same level or with the same dignity as environmental goals, climate goals, and so on. And it should also be underlined that there are new ways for governments to contribute to road safety. As we have been talking about a little bit traditionally, the role of governments is to use traditional policy instruments like legislation and to govern the development of the society in a desired way. But we have to understand that governments and public enterprises are also important stakeholders, since they in many cases generate road transport in their daily operations. For example, postal services, road authorities, procuring contractors to build and maintain infrastructure. And this target, 12.7, clearly points out the importance of governments and authorities and public enterprises to secure the sustainability of their own operations, which they generate or procure as a part of their traditional operations. And we can also see that these targets, 12.6 and 12.7, have been reflected in the Stockholm Declaration, which was endorsed by the Global Ministerial Conference in Stockholm last year. And we can clearly see that in the declaration, there is a call upon businesses and industries to apply safe system principles to their entire value chain, and also to include reporting of safety performance in their sustainability reports. And we can also see that the Stockholm Declaration calls upon public organizations to procure safe and sustainable transport services and vehicles in their operations. And this Stockholm Declaration has been endorsed by the UN General Assembly through a resolution which was taken in September last year. So it's a very, very clear safety in this way.
Sorry, I think we are having some technical problems. Camila, can you confirm if we got disconnected from the presentation?
Yes, I think so. I think we can just move on to Kenneth, if that's not a problem, and continue that way.
Okay, I think it will be possible. Kenneth, sorry about these technical problems. Can you jump into the presentation?
Yeah, I can do my presentation. I
Thank
can't
you.
take over his, but we will try to get in contact with him. I will ask my colleague to try to see if he can contact him and if he can connect again. But I can start my presentation.
Perfect, Kenneth. Let me introduce you. So due to these technical problems, we will go ahead with Kenneth's presentation and then return with Peter. So Kenneth Stevenson is a special advisor of traffic safety in the Swedish Transport Administration in Sweden. Es asesor especial de seguridad vial en la Administración de Transporte de Suecia y el día de hoy nos acompaña para compartir su experiencia y aprendizajes. So today Kenneth will join us to share our experience and knowledge. So thank you, Kenneth, for joining us today, and please go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me. My first question is, can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I will start here. So, as you heard, my name is Kenneth Svensson, and I work at the Swedish Transport Administration and the unit that we call Vision Zero Academy. And I will talk about data, why data-based approach is important, and what kind of data that we normally use when it comes to traffic safety and traffic safety work. So I would just like to inform you about two quite important data set, that is police data regarding traffic injuries and also hospital data. And in Sweden, we have a quite nice system called STRADA. It stands for Swedish Traffic Accident Data Acquisition. That is a system where we combine police data with hospital data concerning the same accidents. So we can get information about the road from the police and information about injuries on the person involved from the hospital. And of course, we know that the police, they go out to the scene of the accident. So they most often have a quite good knowledge about the road condition, the weather conditions, and vehicles involved, and so forth. And they also do some kind of guess when it comes to how injured the persons involved are, but they don't have that deep knowledge. So if a person goes to the hospital, that person is considered to be severely injured. But on the other hand, on the hospital, they treat the patient or the person, so they have a lot of knowledge about the injuries and how injured the person is, but they don't have data about road conditions and weather conditions and vehicles involved. So if possible, if we could combine these data, that would be very, very valuable. And that is what we do in this system. So the police reports are matched with hospital reports into a common database that can be used for different traffic safety analysis for a lot of stakeholders. So here is a typical police report to the left here, and a typical hospital report to the right. So this is in Swedish, but the police report contain a small sketch so that describes what happened during the accident, and there's also some sentences that describing what happened, and there is information about road condition, weather condition, and things like that, what kind of road, where this accident occurred. And there's also information now about how injured the persons were according to the police. And in the hospital report, you can see the focus there is on the injuries. And in this case, it's a fractured elbow. And there is also information about how severe this kind of injury is. There is something that called RPMI, risk for permanent medical impairment. So this particular injury, there's a 35% risk that this patient or person will be permanently injured due to this accident on the 1% level. That is a kind of a way to measure how severe this accident is. And also in this report here, there's some description about where the accident occurred. And these two reports are combined using time and date and personal date, personal number. And if we look into the coverage from the police and hospital, this is data from 2016. That year in Sweden, almost 19,000 police persons were registered in this database that were injured according to the police. And at the same time, it was 28,000 persons that was registered from the hospitals. And there was only a match here, 7,500, where these two reports could be matched. So from this picture here, we can understand that there are quite a lot of persons that the police considered injured that don't need hospital treatment. On the other hand, there are quite a lot of persons that come to the hospital because of a traffic accident that the police have not don't have any knowledge about. And that can make sense, because if a person riding a bike, for example, and falls to the ground, that person most likely don't call the police, but he or she might be injured and need to go to the hospital in order to get treatment. What we also can see in this picture, that there's a quite huge group there, pedestrian fall. That is pedestrian walking on a street, for example, or on the pavement, and trips and falls to the ground and have some kind of injury and need some hospital treatment. And it's quite normally older persons that have these kind of accidents. And you can see that it's a quite huge amount of persons that have these kind of accidents. So it will be quite costful for the society to treat all these persons. And these accidents and injuries are also recorded into this database. And this is very valuable information, because before we had this hospital data, we didn't really understand that this is such a big problem that cause a lot of personal tragedies and persons that have a permanent impairment for the rest of their lives, especially when it comes to older people. So this is important information that also can be used in order to take measures in order to prevent these accidents from happening. Maybe better maintenance of roads and pavements. So let's go into some more data here. If we look into the police reports here to the left, we can see, according to the police, severe injuries from year 2016. And that year, according to the police, most persons that were severe injured were persons sitting in cars. But if you, on the other hand, go to the hospital data, look at seriously injured there, and then we exclude these pedestrian fall that I was talking about before. So we can compare these data a little bit more. Then, according to the hospital, the group that have most severely injuries are bicyclists. So, and it was, as I mentioned before, that this makes sense. People have riding a bike, have an accident and need treatment at the hospital. They don't contact the police. So by using hospital data, you can often get more information and see that vulnerable road users are having quite a lot of injuries compared with persons sitting in cars. And that is a group that sometimes is forgotten if you just look into police reports. So both these data sets are valuable and can be used in preventive traffic safety work. And I just added another slide here that can be a bit interesting. The number of injured riding electric scooters in Sweden, a couple of years. And as you might have noticed in many cities, these electric scooters become more and more for every day. And that is also the case in Sweden. And of course, this reflects in the statistics. So from going from almost no accident or injured persons in these kinds of accidents, it suddenly exploded in 2019, and now it's probably even more. So this is something we have to address in the traffic safety work. And in this Strada system, you can also plot the accidents on a map like this. And of course, you understand that this is very valuable for any kind of city planner to see where the accidents occur and use this information in order to see what can be done in order to improve the situation. So injury data from the police or hospital make it possible to see what is the major problem in a city, for example, when it comes to injuries in road traffic. You can prioritize what you should start working with. If you make any traffic safety measures, you can evaluate those by using this data before and after studies. You can follow trends, etc. And I understand, of course, we have a very fancy system in Sweden, this Strada system that is very useful. But if you don't have hospital data where you are, that is where we were in 20 years ago. But then we started a pilot project in my city, actually, Gothenburg, where I live. And that project and that information we got out from that project, it was one hospital that started to record traffic injuries into a database. And those lessons we learned from that project was that vulnerable road users are a much larger group that we knew of before, just using police data. So if you don't have hospital data, maybe you can try to see if you can start a pilot project, because just out from that pilot project, I'm sure that you can find very valuable information that can be used in a general level in your city or country. So that is something I could recommend if that is possible. Okay, so now I've been talking about police data and hospital data. Another data set that we use in Sweden are information from our in-depth studies of fatal accidents. In Sweden, all fatalities in road traffic undergo an in-depth study by accident investigators at the Swedish Transport Administration. So our investigators, they go out to the accident spot and look into the road, measure up the road and ask why did this accident occur? Is there any deficiencies on the road that made this accident so severe? They also look into the vehicles involved in the accident, so they can check if the seatbelt has been used. They can look at the tires or if there were any deficiencies on the vehicle. We also gather information about the road user. For example, in Sweden, almost every person that are killed in a road accident, there is an autopsy performed on that person. So we can get information if the person involved have been drinking, have alcohol in the blood and things like that. So this is information that we gather in these in-depth studies of fatal accidents. So what is an in-depth study? As I said, we look into all fatal accidents in Sweden, and the main objective is to identify what caused the fatal injuries. It's not that we look into who is to blame for the accident. That is not our job. That is the police that is responsible of that. We as a system designer, as a road builder, we want to know how come people are dying out on the roads that we are responsible for. What can we do in order to prevent that from happening in the future? So that is our objective of these performing these investigations. And it has been a routine in Sweden, and it's since 1997. It was that year also when the Swedish Parliament adopted the Vision Zero strategy in Sweden. So we wanted to get more information about the most severe accidents on our roads to understand what can be done in order to prevent these. So it's regulated in the government's instruction to the Transport Administration. So this is something that we need to do. So when we do these studies, we say there are 3 questions that need to be answered. That is, what happened? Why did it happen? And what can be done to ensure that it does not happen again? And here on this slide, you can see a picture of a road where we had actually a fatal accident. It was a car that drove into this building here. And after the accident, we put up this guardrail in order to prevent a similar accident from happening again on this particular spot. So this is one kind of measure that you can perform after an in-depth study. But in most cases, the information that we gather can be used in a more systematic way. For example, here we can find a building standing very close to the road, but maybe we can need to do some kind of inventory on this road stretch. Are there many places like this? Can we start to have some kind of plan in order to fix the most urgent places first and not just focus on one spot? And the data is also very commonly used for research and it's used by many partners. So that was a little bit about data sets, hospital data, police data, data from the in-depth studies of fatal accidents that can be used to improve road safety. But there are also other data that is very valuable when it comes to road safety work. And that is what we call road safety performance indicators. And what is that? As I have mentioned, we have fatalities and serious injuries on the roads, unfortunately. So that is the ultimate consequences of our traffic system. And of course, this is something we follow all the time, look into the trend of the fatalities, for example. But we also have measures in order to improve the system out there. But we know 1 year, maybe the fatalities increases dramatically, maybe not dramatically, but it might increase from 1 year to another. And that can be quite alarming for people in charge. Why is this that we have such an increase of fatal accidents, for example? But there, you have to remember, there is also a random fluctuation in statistics also when it comes to fatalities in road traffic and seriously injured in road traffic. So there can be an increase 1 year, and that does not mean that the road environment have become worse or the traffic safety level have become worse, so to say. It's just a random fluctuation. So there is something missing here from measures performed in order to improve road safety and the consequences, and that is these road safety performance indicators. So that can, for example, be the proportion of sober drivers in traffic, since we know that in Sweden, for example, 25% of all fatal crashes, alcohol is involved. So if we somehow can measure the level of sober or unsober drivers in road traffic, that can be valuable. And then we try to have measures in order to push this road safety performance indicator in the right direction, so that in the ultimate end here, the consequences will be less severe, the fatalities will decrease. Or for example, when it comes to safe roads, the proportion of traffic volume on roads with median barriers, that is something we try to measure in Sweden, since we know that that is very good for road safety. Or we measure the seatbelt use in our country as well. And then we have measures in order to try to influence these indicators in the right direction. So for example, then 1 year, the fatalities increase in our country, and people in charge are very worried about these. But then we can say, well, if you look into these road safety performance indicators, they are going in the right direction. The number of drunk driving fatalities has decreased, or we have built more roads with the medium barrier. So the roads have actually become more safe. So then we can be quite rest assured that this is just a random fluctuation of the statistics, so to say. So by working with this road safety performance indicators, it's a good strategy in order to push traffic safety forward, and not just look at the consequences, the fatalities and seriously injured. Of course, we look at that as well, but working with this road performance indicators is a very systematic approach to road safety. But in order to do that, you need to have data. You need to somehow measure these indicators every year, for example, in order to see how are these performance indicators moving from one year to another. And we also set goals for these road safety performance indicators. And we know if we reach these goals for the road safety performance indicators, we will also reach the ultimate goal, and that is to decrease the number of fatalities and seriously injured in road traffic. So for example, in the European Union, we have this long-term goal that by 2050, there will be close to zero death and seriously injured in road traffic. Then we also have interim targets that we should have 50% fewer deaths and seriously injured between 2020 and 2030. And then we have these intermediate outcome targets, and those are based on key performance indicators directly linked to reducing death and injuries. And key performance indicators within the European Union is these that you can see here on this slide. So it has been decided that within the European Union, we will measure the percentage of vehicles traveling within speed limits, for example. We will measure safety belt, the percentage of occupants using safety belt, and percentage of children using child restraint system, and so forth. And all the countries within the European Union will try to measure this every year and work in order to push these indicators in the right direction, so that the level of road safety will become better. And of course, as I said, you need data in order to work with road key performance indicators. But what if you don't have these data? What if the police data is poor, or you don't have hospital data, and it's difficult to collect data about like key performance indicators and the fleet out there on the roads and things like that? Can't you work with traffic safety if that is the case? No. Or rather, yes, you can work with traffic safety, absolutely, because it has to do with controlling harmful energy. It has to do with the amount of crash impact a human being can tolerate. And if you work according to the principle of a safe system or Vision Zero, you can still work proactively with traffic safety without having a lot of data, even though data is very valuable. For example, if you have a road where there's a risk for a head-on collision, you know that even if you sit in the most safe car available out there in the market, that vehicle cannot protect a human being if the speed limit or if the collision speed is more than 80 kilometers per hour, because the technology is not there yet. So if you have this oncoming traffic on the road, then you should try to have a speed limit that is survivable, and you can work with surveillance or speed cameras in order to help the drivers to stick to the speed limit. Or if you have the possibility to build 2+1 road with a medium barrier, then you can increase the speed to, well, 100 or even more, because then it's still safe to travel on these roads. And if you have vulnerable road users that are mixed with the cars, then you know that what a human being can tolerate when it comes to crash impact is somewhere around 30 kilometers per hour, and that is survivable. So then you have to work with that knowledge. You can work, as you can see on this picture here, with the speed bumps, and here we have also like fencing, so that we can direct a pedestrian to a place where it's quite safe to cross the road, because we have a speed bump there. So the energy in that particular point, so to say, is quite low, and it's quite safe to cross the road there. Or you can work with roundabouts, because we know that that is a very good Vision Zero or safe system solution, because the energy involved in a crash in a roundabout is much more survivable compared with a crash side-on collision with two cars in a junction. So if you have the knowledge of the basic principle within the Vision Zero strategy or the safe system strategy, you can still work proactively with traffic safety, even though you don't have a lot of data available. Yes, and that is actually what I'm saying in this slide. Even if there is a lack of data, it is possible to work proactively with traffic safety if the work is based on the principles of Vision Zero. And here I have a picture of a policeman with this speed camera. Thing. So you can buy a speed camera like that. It's not very expensive, and check the speed on a road, for example. And that can also be used to evaluate a measure that is taken in order to improve road safety. And just to illustrate this, I had the opportunity to work in a World Bank project in Bosnia for a couple of years ago. We were asked to look into a road section that the police said there's a lot of accident occurring on this spot here, on this section. What should we do? And this was in a village, and we did not have any data. So we actually bought a speed camera like this, and here are some colleagues of mine checking the speeds. And on this section, the speed limit was 50 kilometers per hour. And we went out there, checked the speed for a couple of hours, and we found out the average speed of cars was 64 kilometers per hour. 95% of the speeding here, and the 85 percentile was 71 kilometer per hour. So of course we understood, we could show this statistic to people in charge, that you have a problem with speeding, you have to have some kind of calming measures on this spot. So here pedestrians were supposed to cross this road. There were bus stops on opposite sides of the road, and children were supposed to cross the road. So of course this was a very, very difficult situation for vulnerable road users especially. But by getting this data, it was much easier to suggest what should be done in order to improve the situation. Okay, so some conclusions. Police data, hospital data, data from in-depth studies, they complement each other, can be used in proactive work in order to increase road safety. And this data make it possible to see what is the major problem, to prioritize, to evaluate traffic safety measures. And other data regarding the road network and road users can enable to work with key performance indicators. That is a very systematic way to work with road safety, I would say. But even if data is missing, it is possible to work proactively with traffic safety. And that is a very important lesson to learn. And I think that was everything. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you for this great explanation about data and the use of data and where to start. So you give us and share us great insights and experience. So I think we are going to the session of questions and answer, Kenneth. So please, all our attendees, you can share with us, Ariadne and also Akoyani, the questions that we have from our attendees, please.
Hi, Sonia. We are waiting for questions.
Okay, perfect. So maybe I will start, Kenneth, with one question in order to have some of the attendees. But in Mexico, we have a great challenge in terms of data registration on behalf of the traffic police departments, and also there is a lack of merging information from the health systems, from the hospitals. So as a country that is starting to identify that data evidence-based is the path to address road safety, what will be your main recommendations in order to not only focus in, as the last part that you shared that was about traffic safety, but what will be your convincing arguments to all the stakeholders that nowadays don't identify that data must be shared between their agencies, because that is one of our great challenges.
Well, in Sweden, we have this approach that we try to work together with different stakeholders. And I think that is one key of success, actually, that you enable sharing of data, because the outcome of that will be so much greater than every stakeholder holding the data on its own. For example, in Sweden, we can share, we can look at hospital data and police data, and we can also look into when this data is matched together, we get a lot of knowledge of what kind of injuries occur in different situations. And this data can be used by car manufacturers in order to improve vehicles, and we can drive the traffic safety work forward in so many different levels. So I don't know what to say, how you should do in order to improve the situation, but I know it's very, very valuable if you start sharing data with each other, if that is possible. That will improve ultimately the outcome there on the roads if it is used in a wise way.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Sonia, we have one question from Karna KC. The question is, EIS data, can we synchronize with traffic data?
Can you please say that question again? I didn't get it. What data?
EIS data, can we synchronize it with traffic data?
What did you say there in the beginning? IS data? I didn't understand that.
If maybe Karna can just post here on the chat, because she just posted the letters EIS.
ISA, okay. You mean like intelligent, yeah. This data that is used in order to
emergency information system data.
Emergent. Okay. Yeah, I think that can also be interesting data to share actually. Then you get knowledge about, I guess, where accidents occur, and that can also be interesting if you don't have any other kind of data sets. So all kind of data that can be used to understand the situation, and that can be used in order to improve the situation, and or to do follow-up before and after is of course valuable. So you have to try to work with what you have and start from there. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. We have a second question. Is it possible to know which calming measures were recommended where the spot speed survey was carried out? It's from Akash, from Mauritius.
Can you please say that again?
Is it possible to know which calming measures were recommended where the spot speed survey was carried out?
Well, of course, it depends on what kind of situation it was. Is it in an urban area where there's a lot of vulnerable road users? I would say in many residential areas in Sweden, we have speed bumps, and that is not because that exactly in that residential area there's a lot of accident. That is like a systematic approach that we know that we want to calm the traffic where we have vulnerable road users, and speed bumps is a very effective way to do that. We have other solutions, of course. We have these speed cameras that are very effective that we work with on rural network in order to make the road users to follow the speed limits. And we are very open with our speed cameras as well. It's not that we want to collect a lot of money to the state using these cameras. It's on the the other way around. We have like signs before the speed cameras that's saying there's a speed camera ahead. But because we want to make the road safer, and if people decrease the speed, that is our main purpose. It's not the main purpose to get a lot of money in from the system. So we have a very good acceptance for the speed cameras in Sweden. So of course it depends on what network you look at, what calming measures are the most effective.
Thank you, Kenneth. We have one more question, Sonia. Can we ask one more question?
Yes, I think
Yes?
so.
Okay. How do you utilize these findings from crash analysis for education for regular drivers and children and seniors?
As I mentioned, we use this data for research. We have car manufacturers that look into this data in order to see what they can do to improve the vehicles. Yeah. But we also look into this data and see what kind of accidents occur, and we look into, can this data be used in order to look into how to educate new drivers, what situation are most common for people that have not had driving license a very long time, for example. So we try to use this data in many ways, and it has given us a lot of information that is very useful for our traffic safety work.
Thank you. If we have time for one more question. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we have time for a last question, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any guidelines for information we should at least start collecting to measure traffic safety and generate KPIs? Or which data do you believe is the most relevant to start with?
As I mentioned, I think some kind of key performance indicator regarding speed. I think that it's very important. In some way, speed is the key factor here, because the speed is so linked to the crash impact. what the human body can tolerate. But I would say speed, I would say safety belt use, helmet use, for example. I think those are some very important key performance indicators. But you can look at the slides from the European level where you have those key performance indicators. But I think speed is a very important thing to measure.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think Sonia.
Thank you, Kenneth. So we will continue the session with Peter. So Peter, if you are ready, we can start. So restart. Perfect?
Yes, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can hear you, Peter.
Perfect. I don't know what happened. I'm very sorry for that, but I was totally thrown out, thrown out from the session. It was some kind of technical problems, probably. Yeah, I will go back. I think I checked with Eva where you lost me or where I lost you. And we were talking about the Stockholm Declaration and about integrating safe system principles to value change in companies and also in public organizations. And I don't know if you heard that, but we talk about value chains, and that's the from raw materials, from the extracting of raw materials throughout suppliers, inbound logistics, and so on, and all through to the product end of life. And the value chain of many big companies, they are extremely complex, and they generate a huge amount of road transports around the world. And for that reason, they have a great impact on road safety. And I think especially you can say that in low and middle income countries. It's clear, even if we don't have explicit statistics, that many of the global road fatalities occur in someone's value chain. And as I said, also, most of them probably are in low and middle income countries. And if we look at multinational companies, their value chain is complex and often very long. It often starts in low and middle income countries, and where raw material is extracted, and then they end up through lots of road transports in high income, often in high income countries, where the product is consumed. And if we go back, I hope you can remember that if we go back to the traditional governance model of road safety. So in these transport, road safety is something between the driver and the police. There are regulations issued by the government, and then the police, they should check that the road users or drivers, that they follow the rules. The company who is procuring this transport often puts a pressure on the transport company to carry out the transports as cheap as possible and to be in time. And for that reason, the transport company then transfers or delegates this pressure to the driver and leaves the responsibility to comply with the traffic rules to the driver. And this often means that he or she, the driver, has to break the law. It is a very problematic situation. On one hand, you shouldn't break the law, break the rules, but you should also follow the intentions or the orders from your company that you must deliver in time and so on. So that's a very, very tough situation. It would be more natural and effective if the buyers and providers of the road transport services, if they took a greater responsibility over the safety of their transports. And we should also bear in mind, which I was talking about a little bit earlier, that the public companies and authorities generate value chains, which are often long and complex. I was talking about postal services, infrastructure providers, and so on, and road transport generated in the ordinary operations of these authorities and so on. And if we look today, we can see that other sustainability issues, they are more and more integrated into these, to the company's value chains. And the question now is, how do we integrate road safety into these value chains? We have to start, I think, now to investigate how we can increase leadership and responsibility taking in these chains. And of course, this depends on the country's culture, political environment, and so on. So it's maybe not so easy to do. But as I said, it's very, very clear that the UN, that they really point out the contribution from the private sector and also from the public sector to contribute to the sustainability goals, which, as I also underline, is the road safety is a part of now. So how can we do that? One way of doing it, and that we are exploring now at the moment in Sweden, and as I said, as a reaction of the Stockholm Declaration and so on, is to use or utilize the momentum of sustainability reporting. We can see that the demands from the public, from customers, from investors, and so on the private sector or companies, organizations, to show their commitment to and how they work with social and environmental issues in their operations. And for that reason, sustainability reporting has emerged the last 2 decades or something like that as an important tool for companies and organizations to reveal or declare their impact on sustainability issues and how they deal with them. And these sustainability reports, they are mainly directed towards external stakeholders like investors, customers, or NGOs, and so on. And we should also understand that sustainability reporting is not only to report or declare or measure some kind of KPI or something like that, and to declare it or to show it to externally. It is a whole management system to increase the commitment and the systematics in order to contribute to sustainable development. So it's a kind of a management system, sustainability reporting. And if I talk from a European perspective, we have legislation on sustainability reporting in place, but they are very vague regarding road safety. Some of the legislations, they talk about the safety of their workforce, of their employees, but they are not talking about third party or employees among subcontractors and so on. And definitely it's not talking about third party, because if we look at, for example, truck accidents in Europe, if you have one dead truck driver or one accident, it can kill a lot of people. So we see outside. So for one person who dies in a truck or something like that, the level of what's happening outside is 10 times more higher than. And there are some standards and guidelines in place, for example, the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, and there are also some other standards, but they are also vague regarding road safety. It is mentioned as an occupational and health safety issue, but as I said, there's nothing about third party persons. So in Sweden, we are now exploring what can we do with sustainability reporting, and also the FIA, the International Motorsport Organization, are working with to complete the, for example, the GRI standard with different perspectives of road safety. So you can include that in your sustainability reportings. So I will stop there, and I thank you very much for your attention. So please, if you have questions.
Thank you, Peter. So I think we will go for some questions. Uh, so please feel free to share all your comments, thoughts in the chat we have at the right of your screen. So go ahead, please, Ariadne and Akoyani. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. We don't have any question yet, but we have one question left for Stephen from Kenneth. Sorry, I don't know if I can read while there are another questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Yes, the question is, do you think speed humps are an effective traffic calming devices bearing in mind emissions?
Yes, I do. If you have speed bumps and if you work with them in an efficient way, you can decrease the speed in a not just on one spot. It can be like a section, and it will reduce the emission, not increase the emission. And on the rural network where we work with our speed cameras, that is a huge reduction of emission due to the reduced speed. So if you are able to reduce the speed, in most cases, the emissions will be reduced as well, if you work with it in a smart way.
Thank you, Kenneth, for answering that question. We have another question now for Peter. The question is from Victor Cruz, and he asks, what tools or what kind of information allows the alignment of road safety within the framework of sustainability?
I don't know if I really understand the question, but of course there are synergy effects between, for example, speed is very good example. If you lower the speed, you will of course lower the risk of accidents and the risk of fatalities and serious injuries, and you will also make a contribution to better climate and less pollution and things like that. So we have to look more where we can find these integrated effects really between the different sustainability development goals. And it's very clear that the 2030 agenda says clearly that these the SDGs, they are integrated and they are indivisible. So you have to look at where can we find the best integrated effects between the different SDGs. But the speed is a very good example.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I think you answered it well. We have another question from Harvindradas. I don't know if I spelled correct. The question is, in Mauritius, I don't know, a city, I think, we will soon implement the Love 30 concept. The Love 30 concept in city centers where we have mixed traffic. Can you tell us if you support this initiative of reducing the speed to 30 kilometers?
I can question for Kenneth, please.
Yeah, I can start anyway. I don't know exactly what that Love 30 concept is about, but it sounds as if you try to lower the speed where there is a mix of traffic with vulnerable road users and vulnerable or non-vulnerable road users. And of course, that is a good concept. But it's important to try to not just use the signs in order to try to lower the speed. You have to have some kind of physical measures in order to make it effective, because we know that just the sign will not always reduce the speed. But from what I hear from what it's written here, it sounds like a good concept, even though I don't know exactly what. I support the idea of 30 where there's a mix of traffic.
Yes, yes. Just to clear, yeah, the Love 30 campaign was just developed by the United Nations recently, but it's about that to reduce the speed in the cities. So we have another question from Alejandro. Is what will be a good example of a road safety standard that logistics companies should include in their sustainability reporting?
I think that you should focus on a couple of areas. You should, of course, you should create preconditions for the drivers to keep within the speed limits, and that could be through technical devices and so on. It should also, you should also have measures to secure that the drivers cannot be unsober or drunk when they are driving. For example, alcohol, some kind of alcohol interlocks. They should also choose the most safe vehicle in the category that they are using. For example, if you talk about trucks, there will probably be more and more different ADAS systems, advanced driver assistance systems, for example, emergency braking and things like that. So they should secure that the vehicles they at least they are buying are have the highest level of a safety standard. So I think that this is the way they should work. But also one important thing is they should, and that's what I talked about, this FIA Foundation initiative. They should also be able to measure their road safety footprint, how many people are dying in their value chains, not only employees, their own employees or subcontractor employees, but also third party. And so they to understand the magnitude of the problem and the problem they are a part of, really. So I think that would be something very good.
Thank you, Peter. We have another question. What are the preventive measures to reduce distractions, like the use of cell phones, in the causes of road accidents, road traffic crashes, etc.?
Kenneth, you or me?
You can take that one.
I can start then. Distraction is, of course, a problem, and the distraction problem is so much more than only a cell phone problem. We have made lots of investigations about this in Sweden, but I think distraction, no matter what the source of distraction is, must be handled by technology in the car. I don't find another way, because we cannot legislate and say that people should not be distracted. We have tried in many countries to legislate that you should not use your cell phone, but people use your cell phone anyways. There are lots of evidence around the world that legislation on prohibition to use cell phones are not very, very effective. So in my opinion, we have to solve this with technology in the car. And I know at least in the Euro NCAP, Euro Car Assessment Program, they are looking at such systems and to evaluate such systems in new cars.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for your answer. I think we don't have any more questions, so I don't know, Sonia or Alejandro, you can.
Thank you, Akoyani. Thank you, Peter, and also thank you, everyone of our attendees. I don't know if we have a little more time, Camila, to have any further questions, or we start closing the webinar.
If there are any questions left, we still have a few minutes. If not, we can start closing.
Perfect. So we give 1 minute more in order you can share any question you have left. And if not, we are going up to close the webinar. So Kenneth and Peter shared with us today all these experiences, but I think in our local contexts, we have many questions. So feel free to share with us also via email if you don't have some prepared right now. So we will continue to close this webinar. So thank you, Peter, and once again, thank you, Kenneth, for this useful information and the shared experience. Okay, we have one more question, I think. So we will go ahead with this last question. Akoyani, please, from Giovanni Salta.
Yes, I will read
Giovanni.
it. Yes, from Giovanni. He wants to know if speed management in cities depends a lot on technology, or how you can start when you don't have public investment resources. Yes, I don't know if... sorry, Peter, I think you're mute.
Can you please read this question again, because I don't understand it really.
Yes, of course. And the question is like, what do you do in cities when you don't have the technology or the public investment resources to do speed management? So what about this gestion of speed management in cities that doesn't have the technology, the resources? I think it is that.
Of course, it's very hard, but you could first of all at least set the speed signs or the speed limits to 30 kilometers per hour. This will of course help. Then if you can add then police enforcement, that's very good. But at least that you lower the speed limits in cities, because that will not cost too much, I think, in investment. So that's my opinion there. Kenneth, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. So of course it's very hard if you don't have any resources, but changing the speed limit will help in the right direction, even if we know that people not always follow the speed limit. But usually the average speed will decrease if you lower the speed limit, so it will help a bit. But then if you could add, as Peter said, enforcement, and maybe speed bump is not that that costly either. So yeah, you have to start somewhere and build on what you can.
Thank you, Peter. I think we have another question. I don't know if there is time for me to read it. Yeah. Okay. It's about regarding speed. We engineers are looking for all types of calming measures, but on the other hand, the industry is constructing more powerful cars. So she would like your appreciation, your opinion about this situation happening in cities.
This is a classical question. During my career, I heard it so many times, and this is more of a for politicians to answer, I think, not as an expert. Of course, as an expert, cars should drive in line with the speed limit. I would like to see, intelligent speed adaptation systems in cars that make it very hard to drive over the speed limit. But and I know, for example, Volvo, they have lowered the top speed of their cars. I don't remember what the number was, but okay, it was not, I think it was 180 kilometers per hour or something like that. Maybe Kenneth knows better. But this is of course not enough, but it's a clear signal that this is not okay anymore. We have to take our responsibility as car manufacturers to do something. But this is a political question, I think, for politicians. But of course, I would like to see cars that go within the speed limit. That's the simple way for me to see it.
Thank you, Peter. Sonia, we have another question, but I read it? Or okay. Yes. The question is, what we need to do first for the publishing big data over the law, and what is the biggest problem for that? I don't know if you understand the question or
and maybe it's a data question. Maybe it's for Kenneth, and I don't know. I really understand the question.
But to be honest, I publishing big data over the. Can it be rephrased somehow? I really don't know. Peter, if you have anything to say.
No, I don't have publishing here, but what kind of big data is meant over the law? I know I don't know if you are the one who's asking if Spanish or Portuguese talking, that could make it in Portuguese and Spanish, and someone can
to share data. Okay, to make it publicly available. So I don't know, Peter, if you have anything to say.
I just if we talk about the data on more on the
to make data available
of data, to make them available, that is a little bit harder because of the privacy rules and so on. Of course, you can publicize aggregated data from the in-depth studies, and we do that. We use it, and we use aggregated data from the fatal accidents. But I'm not sure. I don't know if you can say anything about the Strada data or other data.
Well, when it comes to authorities, we can share some of the data because the secrecy is transferred. The authority that gets the data, it's also need to take care of the data in a proper way. And also when we do research on data, people that are using the data need to sign an agreement that data or information regarding personal data is not shared. So aggregated data is possible to share, but not when it comes to individual persons.
Well, so Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you, Peter, once again for this useful information and all your presentations of both of you. And due to time, we are not now going to close the webinar. So I want to thank you all of our participants too for your time and for your active participation and all the questions you have shared with us. We invite you to share also and check out the Vision Zero website for more information. So you will find in visionzerochallenge.org all this information that we have exchanged and shared today with both Peter and Kenneth. And please, we invite you to our next webinar, and we look forward to see you at the same time and in the same channel. On our next webinar will be on vehicle safety, road design, environment, and road safety. So thank you all for this time shared and for all your exchange in terms of questions and doubts you have today in this session. So thank you and have a great day.